In this video, we are going to talk about the different options of tinnitus treatment. Welcome to Ear Man Dan. If you're new here, my name is Daniel and a very warm welcome. I'm a hearing care professional and the owner of Ear Studio in Castle Hill in Sydney. But more importantly, I spend my days helping people, not just to hear better, but actually to understand better and leave behind the challenges of hearing loss. And in this channel, I break down how hearing really works, how the hearing care landscape looks in Australia, and what you can do to get the best possible outcome. Now, I invite you to follow along in this journey. So welcome back, and now we come to the second part of the tinnitus video. Otherwise, it would have been just way too long. As I mentioned last time, it's likely going to be 2 videos. So if you haven't yet watched the first part of the tinnitus video, please go back and do so. We are going to put a link in the description. In the last video, we basically went through the importance of diagnosing properly, and now today we want to talk about the treatment options. And we are going to divide the treatment into 2 issues. On one hand, we want to reduce the dominance of the sound if that is possible. And on the other hand, we want to reduce the social, emotional, and mental impact that the tinnitus causes. So it's 2 separate things that can be treated there. For these examples that I'm going to bring in this video, we are assuming that the tinnitus is not caused by any growth or related to any other medical issues that require immediate attention. If a growth, for example, is involved, it's obviously crucially important to discuss those treatment methods with your medical team. At the same time, I should say that anything in this video is not going to be medical advice. So please speak to your doctor or to your treating clinician. What I'm sharing here today in this video is just general comments on certain aspects of tinnitus treatment, but it is not considered medical advice. Just wanted to make mention of that. So let's just summarize quickly the previous 3 parts that I mentioned in the last video. The first thing that I mentioned was ignore the nothing can be done phrase, because there's always hope. And in many cases, there are a lot of things that can be done. Second step was stop the online research. In most cases, we find that online research is more harmful than it is helpful, really. And thirdly, as I said, educate yourself through professionals. And that's probably the most important thing, really. So please speak to like a hearing care professional who works with tinnitus patients. Not all of them do, so just make sure that they do have some reasonable experience with working with tinnitus patients. So let's come to the first and probably one of the most important aspects in the category of reducing the dominance of the noise. We've already established that in most cases, the tinnitus is related to some sort of a loss in hearing capacity. That means that the brain has reduced sound input from the ears. And in the absence of sound, the tinnitus flourishes. So the very first step, if there's any hearing loss involved, is hearing rehabilitation. Basically what that means is we need to improve the access the brain has to sound. If a hearing loss is part of the picture, improving access to sound then often helps to reduce the dominance of the tinnitus significantly. Not just a little, but huge. When the brain has just more real sound to focus on, like environmental sounds, the tinnitus normally fades far into the background. So if there's any hearing loss, no matter how mild, consider a hearing device fitting, as that has huge chances for improvement. The good thing is that most clinics offer devices for a few weeks or even a month or 2 before you're fully committing to purchase and keep the devices. So you can work with your hearing care professional to investigate how well you react to amplification and to hearing these environmental sounds. Most people after like 6 weeks describe it as that the tinnitus is still there, but they don't notice it anywhere near as much as before. And in most cases, they kind of forget about it. And that is a very realistic and very positive outcome of hearing rehabilitation that we see very frequently with tinnitus patients. And I want to pause here briefly. In my experience as a hearing care professional over 20 years, the combination of proper education, so when the hearing care professional takes time, and that may take an hour or 2 in a couple of sessions to talk the patient through what the tinnitus means, how it comes about, and then the treatment of hearing loss. Those 2 things is all that most people needed. And that is like, it's the case much more often than not. I mean, even in really severe cases where we had people in the clinic in an absolute crisis mode, like talk fetal position and tears and not knowing how to live with the tinnitus, to, oh, tinnitus is no longer a problem for me. Just by doing those two things and doing those two things well, that is really important. Not just like, oh yeah, tinnitus, nothing can be done, get used to it, slap a hearing aid on and hope for the best. That's not what I mean. Do that well. Spend time with a hearing care professional, talk it through, and get hearing devices properly fitted, which takes a few sessions over a few weeks. But then you will notice a huge improvement to the tinnitus. At least that is extremely likely. Second part is a sound enrichment strategy. Basically, in short, don't sit in silence. One of the simplest strategies actually is to avoid complete silence. That's especially true at night because it is, again, in the absence of sound where the tinnitus has kind of more free rein, so to speak, where you notice it the most. In silence, the tinnitus actually often feels louder because there's nothing else that the tinnitus competes with. Now, sound enrichment can be any form of background sounds. That could be a soft background sound in the room or even played by a device. Apple actually has a feature called background sounds, and that's built in. You could even use a little bit of piano music. But let me actually stop here for a second and go off script. You know the company Apple that makes iPhones, and obviously a rhetorical question. Surely you do know Apple, and you would also think, well, they are developing devices for like literally millions of people around the world. When they develop features that are built in their operating system, you would think that they don't build features that are just useful for a very small group of people. They normally build features that are applicable to many because otherwise it wouldn't be worth building that into their system. So understand that Apple has made a decision to build a feature in there called background sounds with the sole purpose of treating tinnitus. So in that said, it is not an app that you need to download on an iPhone. There are tons of apps that are available. But this is actually built into the standard operating system of any iPhone that you can buy. And Apple would only do that if it affects a lot of people. So that is just to give you a little bit of reassurance that there are actually a lot of people with tinnitus. It's just that it's not much talked about, really, because most people get to that stage where they can just ignore it for most of the time and then they hear it occasionally, but it's not longer a kind of feature in their life that is worth talking about. So just wanted to give you a bit of encouragement. A lot of people have it, so many that even Apple decided to build something on. Anyway, let's get on with the rest of the video. When we come back to the background noise, I mentioned a bit of piano music while you're reading, any nature sounds. You can just leave a window open. Even a fan or low-level aircon, it's often all that's needed to get the tinnitus more in the background. And the goal here is not to mask that tinnitus with even louder sounds. The goal is more to give the brain something else to anchor to and to process so that the tinnitus goes in the background. At the same time, we should also say that you need to kind of be careful and avoid excessive noise. So the presence of very loud sounds can often exacerbate the tinnitus at a later stage. So you come out of a really noisy environment and you feel, oh wow, the tinnitus is a lot louder. So try to avoid exposure to excessive noise. So use hearing protection when using power tools, going to concerts, or even sometimes when you go to the movies or an environment where it's really, really loud. But at the same time, don't go overboard. I don't want you to wear hearing protection for the slightest bit of traffic noise when you walk down the road. All right, third part that I want to talk today about in terms of treatment is tinnitus education and counselling. That part is kind of quite underrated and addresses more the part of reducing the impact of the hearing or of the tinnitus and the hearing loss rather than the actual noise in itself. But in all honesty, most people won't need a psychologist or a dedicated counselor. Some do, but it's rather rare. When people understand what tinnitus is and how it relates to your situation, so to speak, it often becomes a lot less dominant. In clinic, when we work with patients, a lot of the improvement actually starts with understanding the hearing system, talking through what the tinnitus is and what it's not, setting certain expectations of the process and making a clear plan. For many of my clients, even those that are in crisis mode, I say, look, it is much, much more likely than not that when I see you in 6 months' time, you will tell me that tinnitus is no longer a big problem in your life. But one thing is important to say, and it's actually very important. If you have any history of mental health issues, may that be general depression, general anxieties or depression, and you find that in those situations, the tinnitus is worse, it's really important to at least consider addressing these underlying anxiety and depression issues. As much as we know that hearing loss and tinnitus are related, we also know that some mental conditions can make the tinnitus appear much worse than it actually is. I always say in my clinic with my clients that anxiety, depression, and tinnitus, they are best friends. And where one of them is, the other two kind of want to hang out too. So it's really important to address the mental health aspects, not only the hearing. So if there's any concern about mental health aspects, depression, anxiety, I think that is really, really important to address professionally, because that will likely make the tinnitus go in the background as well. Fourth point to talk about, equally as important as hearing treatment and hearing rehabilitation, is treatment and management of stress and sleep hygiene. If stress or poor sleep are present in your life, maybe unrelated to the tinnitus even, it still makes the tinnitus feel worse because you're longer exposed to kind of silent periods and the tinnitus is raging. So improving sleep routine and reducing the stress load and getting the support where needed or make these life adjustments can make a huge difference. And that also counts for other factors. It's actually quite helpful to make a bit of a list of what things make the tinnitus worse, and in which situations do you not notice the tinnitus as much? And then quite simply increase the activities that make you feel better and reduce the ones that make you feel worse. It sounds quite simple, technically also is, but it's actually an extremely effective method of reducing that aspect of tinnitus. As you can tell already, tinnitus is very multifactorial. There's a lot of things that it can affect, and that in turn can affect the tinnitus. Let's say, for example, that you can't sleep well, as in this example. It causes you to be quite fatigued kind of during the day, and that fatigued feeling can make the tinnitus perception worse. So the tinnitus may be the same, but you perceive it stronger because your body's tired, can't deal with it as well. And then we are kind of in this vicious cycle. You can't sleep, tinnitus is louder. Because of the tinnitus is so loud, you can't sleep, and you've got that cycle, right? And we need to kind of break that cycle. In some severe cases of that, it's actually quite important to speak to the GP and consider what measures could be taken to improve sleep in the short term. For some people, I've seen that in clinical practice, it pays to take a few days off from work, go on a little bit of a holiday, just to try to reset that cycle. Sleep is a bit of a nasty thing. You actually rake up sleep debt. So if you don't sleep well one night, you kind of need to make up for it the next. And if you have consecutive nights with less sleep, it can take a few days to actually make up for that debt. So really, sleep hygiene, really important for people that are dealing with tinnitus. And another point 5 I want to get to today is a structured tinnitus therapy where that is needed. That is really more for very persistent or distressing tinnitus, often for people that also do share mental health, like kind of coexisting conditions. A structured therapy can really help here to habituate, meaning that basically the tinnitus becomes less important to the brain over time. That approach often is multidisciplinary, so it's a team of kind of hearing care professionals. There's maybe an ENT involved, GP, even psychologists or counselors are often involved in that process. And the aim is not here to eliminate the tinnitus, but the aim is to reduce the impact so much that you can live your life normally without any additional impact from the tinnitus. But again, that is only very rarely needed. In that case, you definitely want to work with one main person, like one person that takes care of the treatment process. It's mostly a GP or a counselor, and they often direct the efforts in conjunction with a hearing care professional and other doctors to make sure that, we can deal with the tinnitus as well as possible in that situation. Now, I want to address a couple of things because they are so dominant online that I just want to tell you a few things that usually don't help. And basically a few quick points to keep the expectations realistic. There is very rarely a single magic cure that works for everyone. That's kind of true in anything medical. So avoid chasing these quick fixes that promise guaranteed results is a very good idea, especially if they're advertised kind of online as like tinnitus curing herbs or drops or devices. In a matter of fact, I suggest that you do not get any treatment unless that treatment is recommended by either a hearing care professional or a medical professional such as a doctor. Not to say that everything online is bad. There are a lot of great hearing care professionals and counselors that offer online sessions, and that can be a very effective tool. But a product that is kind of advertised with like, get rid of tinnitus in 30 days. If you see something like that, I would be at least very cautious, okay? Now, if tinnitus is linked to hearing loss, doing nothing and waiting doesn't improve it, especially if the distress is kind of increasing. It's a little bit like going to the mechanic with a car that has an engine problem and saying that you don't want the engine repaired. Just give me new tires, that'll be fine. It just won't work. The same is true for mental health involvement. If mental health is involved, it needs to be part of the treatment considerations. So you may come to a hearing care professional, and I had that a couple of times, and I do understand in some cases where that is coming from. You go to a hearing care professional and say, hey, I've got tinnitus, I just want to get rid of the tinnitus, my hearing is not really bad, I know I have a little bit of hearing loss, but I don't want the hearing loss addressed, I don't want that fixed, I just want the tinnitus gone. That approach often doesn't lead anywhere. Because again, if hearing loss is involved in part of the pictures, we kind of have to treat that because otherwise the treatment of the tinnitus is very ineffective. Same again with mental health considerations. If there are mental health issues in your life, we have to kind of include them in the treatment considerations. For most people, tinnitus pops out of nowhere. It pops up out of absolutely nowhere. And it can feel quite life-disrupting. Reality, though, is that it often doesn't last long for most people. And after a thorough investigation and treatment consideration, it often settles down to a level that is not problematic anymore. Again, it may still be there, somewhere in the background. Like again, as I mentioned a couple of times, I have it personally. I do hear it every night. I do hear it in quiet situations if I focus on it. But other than that, I don't really, it doesn't affect my life in any meaningful way. I often see people that come into the clinic saying the tinnitus is driving me crazy, especially at night or when I'm in quiet. I just don't know what to do. I need to have it gone. Many of them actually have undiagnosed hearing loss. And once we test and diagnose them properly, explain what's happening and make that plan, improving the sound input and so on, even using the sound enrichment therapies for a short time, people usually report within a few months that the tinnitus becomes far less dominant in their day. And that's a great outcome, and it is very achievable for many. So I want to close with saying that tinnitus is very, very common. It is also very often linked to any hearing changes, and in most cases, tinnitus can be managed very effectively, especially when you stop treating it like a mystery and start treating it like a hearing loss and brain type issue. Now, one thing at the very end, I addressed some of the most important things that I wanted to have mentioned out of my personal clinical experience. That's not to say that there are not other options that can be very effective. Certainly not an exhaustive list of treatment options. For example, I didn't touch on nutritional or dietary factors or exercise, which may be part of tinnitus treatment for some people with certain conditions that react to dietary factors. We also didn't mention every possible ear-related condition that can potentially cause tinnitus. I basically just wanted to address the very basics of tinnitus and give a little bit of hope that there's treatment available. Everyone's personal situation needs to be treated individually, and I can't stress enough the importance of proper diagnostics and medical care. It's just one of the most important things. So that's it for today's video. As always, if you've got any questions, please feel free to reach out via email. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. Until then, I wish you all the best and bye-bye.